If you're planning a trip to Grand Canyon National Park and trying to research everything you need to know about visiting Grand Canyon National Park before you go, then you're in the right place. There are some common mistakes that people often make when visiting Grand Canyon National Park, and in this episode, we're going to look at these mistakes so that you will know exactly what not to do when you travel to Grand Canyon National Park. And I'm going to share my number one mistake to avoid at the end. Hi, I'm James Ian, and I've written multiple guides and published several itineraries for Grand Canyon National Park. I hope that these tips will help you have a truly amazing Grand Canyon trip. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe right now. If you're watching this or listening to this somewhere else, please follow my podcast to get the episodes as they come out. Be sure to stay to the end. I'll be sharing my number one mistake that lots of people make. It will make your trip to Grand Canyon National Park more well-rounded so that you won't miss out on the best parts. Let's get into it.
Welcome to National Parks Collecting with James Ian, the National Park expert. He is here to help you have the best National Parks trips ever. Get tips, discover hidden gems, and learn all you need to know. This is your path to collecting National Parks experiences, memories, and maybe even a stamp or two.
So, what are the 7 biggest mistakes that I see people make when they plan their trip to Grand Canyon National Park? Remember to stay to the end for my number one tip to avoid the most common mistake that people make. The most crazy mistake that you can possibly make is only spending 17 minutes or less looking at the canyon. Did you know that the average time spent looking at the Grand Canyon is just 17 minutes? This is crazy to me. Heading to the Grand Canyon and spending only a few minutes gazing into its depths is not doing it justice. There are over 50 viewpoints on the South Rim alone. Each offers a unique perspective on this geological masterpiece. There's dramatic drop-offs at Yavapai Point. There's tranquil vibes at Shoshone Point. Every angle tells a different story. And the canyon changes with the day's light. Sunrise has these really beautiful soft pastels. Midday shows starker contrasts and textures, and then the sunset just kind of blazes the rocks with these really beautiful, fiery kind of colors at the end of the day. So it really deserves more than just 17 minutes. So take your time, wander along the rim, find your favorite viewpoint, or better yet, discover them all, and just let the canyon's beauty just unfold before you over time, and you'll just have a much deeper appreciation of the canyon and its majesty and beauty. What's a mistake that people make when they're planning out their time to Grand Canyon? A mistake that I see many people make is only staying at the entire area for only a few hours. When planning your trip to Grand Canyon National Park, a really common mistake to avoid is selling the experience short by only staying a few hours. A typical whirlwind visit might last 5 to 7 hours in total, most of that not even looking at the canyon, but I think this is more than just a check off your bucket list kind of place. There's a lot to see and do in the area, in addition to looking at the canyon, of course. If you only have one day, then definitely go anyway, for sure. You can take a day trip from Vegas. It's very common, although most day trips from Vegas do go to the west rim of the canyon, which isn't technically inside the national park. It's also where the canyon is less deep and less wide than at the south and north rims. But it's still cool and it's still worthwhile if that's the time you have available. You can also take a train to the South Rim, and it's a really fun day trip. You're just there for a few hours. You will be there when most people are also there. But if that's the time that you have available, it's definitely worthwhile. However, I think it's a mistake to spend so little time if you have more time available. So if you do, I really recommend staying much longer. There's tons of stuff to do at the South Rim. There are ranger talks, junior ranger programs for kids. There's scenic hikes along the rim or below the rim. You can enjoy the sunrise or sunset or both. You can take a mule ride. There's historical buildings. There's just lots and lots to see and do. Plus, of course, the night sky is amazing there. So go shopping at Hopi House, see the historic train station, visit Colby Studios, Lookout Studio, walk the Trail of Time, take a scenic flight. There's just lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff to do. So stay as long as you can. What's another mistake that people make when they're deciding what to do at the Grand Canyon? This mistake is a surprisingly common one, but a common mistake that many people make when visiting Grand Canyon is not going below the rim. While the views from the top are spectacular, they are just the beginning of what the Grand Canyon has to offer, and by not descending even a short distance, then you're missing out on this whole new world of views and experiencing the canyon in a really different way. You really get a sense of its grandeur, of its enormity, when the canyon walls are just surrounding you on all sides. It's very cool. There are trails like the Bright Angel Trail and the South Kaibab Trail that lead from the South Rim, and the North Kaibab Trail from the North Rim. These are your gateways to just a whole different perspective on the canyon. Each of these trails does have its own personality, so you should decide which one suits you best, from switchbacks to rest houses, different lookouts, different views of the canyon. However, I will say that when you decide, or if you decide to hike below the rim, you should be aware that this is a challenging thing to do. In summer, Grand Canyon National Park can get very, very hot, and it can be dangerous to hike too far without water. There's usually water available at several points on the Bright Angel Trail, and at some points on the North Kaibab Trail. There is no water at all on the South Kaibab Trail, so that's something to be aware of. You should never underestimate the difficulty of hiking back up. There's a sign at the canyon that says going down is optional, going up is mandatory. This is absolutely true, so never bite off more than you can chew. In fact, kind of err on the side of caution. The National Park Service does not recommend that you hike from the rim to the river and then the river back to the rim all in one day. This is very dangerous. The canyon depths can be deceiving, and the climb back up is very strenuous, and it often takes twice as long as the descent. So you don't need to go too crazy. Ooh Ah Point on the South Kaibab Trail is appropriately named. You'll go ooh and ah at the view. It's amazing. On the Bright Angel Trail, you can hike it just a short distance to a tunnel that's carved in the rock that's kind of cool, or you can venture down to 1.5-mile rest house or 3-mile rest house. Or if you're very fit and it's not too hot, then you can go as far as Havasupai Gardens. This is the maximum that the National Park Service recommends that you go in one day. And even that can be a lot for most people. So never overestimate your abilities or never underestimate the harshness of the hike and of the heat. Always pack plenty of water, even if you think there's water on the trail. At Bright Angel Trail, for example, stuff does happen and sometimes the water can go off very suddenly, so always have plenty of water. Also have lots of salty snacks. I recommend starting early in the day to beat the heat. The earlier the better. Even if you're just going a short way down, you'll gain a completely different perspective. It's very cool, but just be prepared, plan, and respect the canyon's depth and respect your own limits. Before we look at my other mistakes to avoid in Grand Canyon National Park, if you're watching this on my @National Parks Collecting YouTube channel and you haven't already, please like and subscribe below. It really does help. What's a mistake that people make when they're in the process of planning and preparing for their trip to the Grand Canyon? This kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway because I see many people make this mistake, and that is not booking far enough in advance. The Grand Canyon is the second most popular national park in the country. It draws visitors from all over the globe. Accommodations, especially unique ones like Phantom Ranch, which is at the bottom of the canyon, are in high demand. This isn't a place where you can typically wing it with last-minute plans. You might get lucky and there'd be a last-minute cancellation, but I certainly wouldn't rely on it. Phantom Ranch, which is the only lodging below the rim, right at the bottom near the river, is so sought after that it actually requires a lottery that you need to enter 15 months in advance. That's right, over 1 year ahead. So if you dream of sleeping beside Bright Angel Creek under a canopy of stars, which I totally recommend, planning ahead isn't just recommended, it's essential. But it's not just Phantom Ranch. Campgrounds below the rim and above the rim, hotels on the rim, even popular tours and mule trips get snapped up very quickly. So to avoid disappointment of missing out, I recommend starting your planning as early as possible. So mark your calendar for the booking windows and set reminders for the lotteries. And then once you're booked, of course, you can relax and look forward to the trip and not have to stress about finding accommodations at the last second. We're over halfway through already. Next up is mistake number 5. Okay, you might actually not think that this one is a mistake. You might make a very conscious decision not to do this one, but hear me out. I think a mistake that people make when going to the Grand Canyon is not taking a boat or a raft trip through the Grand Canyon on the Colorado River. This is actually my favorite thing to do. The Grand Canyon very essence is the river flowing through the canyon that carved it, and to skip the chance of riding the water I think, is missing out on a core part of the adventure that the canyon has to offer. The Colorado isn't just a ribbon of water, it's an historical pathway that John Wesley Powell navigated in 1869 when he revealed the canyon's wonders to the world. So following in his footsteps and experiencing the canyon in the same way is super cool. You also just get a perspective of the canyon that you don't get from the rim or even hiking through it. You can really see the layers changing as you go through the canyon, and something that was right next to you, like you could almost touch, further down the canyon is way up in the air now. So it's super cool. It's really fun. There's also different rapids that you can ride. So that's fun. But it doesn't have to be scary. There are different types of boats and rafts that you can take, including a pretty large motorized raft. You don't need to paddle. It actually will smooth out most of the rapids, so it's much stabler and much safer than smaller rafts. If you want the more adventure, then go for the smaller rafts. They're super fun. You can even take a wooden dory, which is a small wooden boat, very similar to the one that Powell took on his original journey through the river. And a guide actually does the rowing, and then you sit there and you bail like crazy as you go through the rapids. The water's coming in the boat. That's actually my favorite. I just love it. It's so much fun. And it's not too much work because the guide is doing most of the rowing. But you're really feeling the rapids. So there is that. There's also, when you go through the canyon, there's lots of secrets that the river holds that you don't realize. For example, I had no idea that there were all these really beautiful sandy beaches on the side of the river along the canyon, and you stay there. You pitch a tent and you camp there overnight on these beaches. There's also ancient Puebloan ruins, there's hidden waterfalls, there's secluded side canyons, just lots and lots of fun. Something to keep in mind, though, is that they are multi-day trips, so you do need to camp overnight on the sandy beaches. If you're not into camping, may not be your thing. You also need the time. Most of the trips will go halfway through the canyon, so you either need to hike out or hike down Bright Angel Trail, so you need that level of fitness. However, the really big motorized rafts can get you through the entire canyon, and that way you don't need to hike. So if you're not super fit, or the thought of a really strenuous hike down or up the canyon doesn't sound like your jam, then the motorized raft might be more your thing. That way you also do get to see the entire canyon rather than half the canyon. There are one-day trips, but they are only in the West Canyon, which is the smaller section of the canyon. If that's the time you have available, then I recommend it still. It's still super cool. But to see the canyon at its deepest and its widest, then you need to go on one of the multi-day trips. So far, we've looked at 5 mistakes that people often make in Grand Canyon National Park. We have just 2 more left. Stay to the end to hear my number 1 mistake that people make. But first up, a really common mistake that people make is not having a detailed and flexible plan for the Grand Canyon. With the overwhelming majesty of the canyon, it's very easy to assume that you can just show up and wing it. However, the park's size and the variety really requires a well thought out itinerary. So whether you're aiming for a day trip or whether you're planning a more extended stay, a structured plan really helps you make the most of your time there. This can mean allocating specific periods to particular viewpoints, hikes, activities, or scheduling your visit to the visitor center to get valuable insights from the park rangers. Something that can also stress people out if they don't have a detailed plan is if they're traveling with different people with different fitness levels and or different interests. Or if you want to mix things up on your trip, that's where flexibility becomes key. So having a plan is essential, but having a plan with different options that you can make different choices and mix and match makes much more sense. In fact, the number one thing that people ask me about when they're planning their trip to Grand Canyon National Park is how to put everything together into an actual itinerary. They'll worry that they'll miss out on some of the best views. They worry that they'll be at a viewpoint or on a hike when everybody else in the entire national park seems to be in the same place at the same time. They worry that they are traveling with a family or a group of friends who have different interests, different levels of activity, different mobility, and they worry how to keep everybody happy. So that's why I created these really detailed itineraries for Grand Canyon National Park. Just click on the link in the notes below and it will take you to a page that explains everything. There are 1, 2, and 3-day itineraries for the South Rim. I also have a more basic itinerary for the North Rim, and that you can use for either 1 or 2 days. The itineraries are really designed to maximize your experience there. They offer a balanced mix of must-see sites and hidden gems, and they also leave room for some spontaneous moments that will help make your trip even more memorable. So with this structured but adaptable plan in hand, you're all set for an amazing Grand Canyon adventure. So what's perhaps the most common mistake that people make when planning out their Grand Canyon trip? The most common mistake that I see people make when deciding what to see and what to do in Grand Canyon National Park is only visiting the South Rim. In fact, only 10% of people who visit Grand Canyon National Park go to the North Rim. The South Rim is definitely more accessible and therefore by far the most visited. There are the most facilities there. It's the easiest to get to. However, I think if you limit your Grand Canyon experience to just the South Rim, that you're missing out on some really unique offerings that the North Rim offers. Because there are a lot fewer visitors there, it offers a more secluded and kind of intimate experience that can really deepen your connection with the park and its beauty. It also sits at about 1,000 feet higher elevation than the South Rim. The canyon is also much wider at the North Rim and much narrower at the South Rim, so the views are quite different, and they offer a really interesting, different perspective on the canyon. The landscape at the North Rim is also very lush and densely forested, which is a bit of a difference from the more arid South Rim. So there's a very different perspective, and one could argue that the views are even better at the North Rim than the South Rim. Some of the highlights of the North Rim include Point Imperial, which is the highest point in the park, and Cape Royal, which offers this amazing panorama that's really hard to beat. There's also the historic Grand Canyon Lodge. You can sit on the patio in a deck chair and enjoy the views right from there. It's very cool. There's a dining room with this huge floor-to-ceiling glass windows that offer amazing views. I recommend trying to time your dinner with sunset. And then the North Kaibab Trail offers a different path below the rim with fewer people. The North Rim's higher altitude does mean that it is only open seasonally, usually from mid-May to mid-October. So you do need to time your visit around those times. The rest of the time it's snowed in and everything's closed. It also takes about 4.5 hours to drive from the South Rim all the way around to the North Rim. So it's not a quick, easy tag on, but it's totally worth the effort in my opinion. And for those willing to make that extra effort to visit the North Rim, you'll be rewarded with a really serene, deeply personal Grand Canyon experience where the pace is slower and I think the moments linger longer. If you want help planning your trip, check the links in the description below. There's a bunch of planning and booking resources that can help you plan and book your trip. And keep watching my videos to get even more help so that you can have the best national parks vacation ever. And if you want to get notified about the next episode, subscribe and click below.